We are talking about Tua timelines here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Special thank you to each and every one of you who have helped to make the Locked On Podcast Network the #1 sports podcast network in the world. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. It's last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet $5. Get $200 in bonus bets if you win. A couple different angles that we're going to take today through on the program. We're going to look at Tua timelines with what's being reported out in the space. And we heard some updates from Ian Rapoport. We heard some updates from Barry Jackson in the Miami Herald. We heard something from Ian Rapoport from Adam Schefter about a potential alternative quarterback. I have something caught in the back of my throat. Please hold. I just found out that Mike Vrabel was a big C4 guy, and I'm devastated. As I'm also a big C4 guy, and we can't give Mike Vrabel too many flowers as the AFC Championship head coach with the New England Patriots. Dolphins also got a new lottery scratch-off ticket that we're going to be touching on. He is a GOAT of the NFL draft process. We'll touch on him at the end of the show today as well. So with that in mind, let's start with Ian Rapoport's comments. It's Super Bowl week, so all of the media circles and the radio row and all the players and all the insiders and everybody makes the rounds, and Jay Glazer's dropping bombs on people out there with the Raiders and Max Crosby. And last year it was Tyreek Hill and the apology tour about my bad. I didn't mean to say I didn't want to be here anymore. Well, this year it's the Tua Tagovailoa media speculation parade is kind of what it feels like. But Ian Rapoport gave us not a surprising quote in talking with Jim Rome, but then what he said after the non-surprising part is the part that was then corroborated by Barry Jackson, the Miami Herald, on a separate piece that he did, and kind of sets the stage for this to probably not be a quick resolution to wherever this ends up going. So let's start with what Ian Rapoport said with Jim Rome. I'd be surprised if Tua is in Miami. Not really any surprises there, right? That should not be that surprising to hear. This is the rest of the quote, though. I think they can trade him, but they're going to have to eat a lot of the contract to do it, which is okay. They're paying it anyway, so you might as well eat. And he threw a number out there off the top of his head, $30 million, and maybe it wasn't off the top of his head. He said, what's the difference? I think they can trade him. And we had heard when he was getting benched and the reports were coming out in December that they were moving on, that like the Dolphins' preferred avenue, at least from the NFL Network side of things, and everybody talks to different people, was that they believed that they could trade him and trading him would be their primary preferred pathway. And we've heard it from Cam Wolfe and Jeff Darlington and Adam Schefter and Ian Rapoport, like all the heavyweights. It's all kind of come out and said the same thing. Like Jeff Darlington said it a week and a half ago, the Dolphins are prepared to move on from Tua Tagovailoa. They know what that's going to consist of. But this statement of thinking that they can trade him and wanting to eat part of the contract to help facilitate that was something that Barry Jackson kind of echoed. He put a story out yesterday and said the three separate sources familiar with kind of the psychology of the team is their preferred avenue is the trade. And I'm going to avoid getting all the way in the weeds on the salary cap stuff right now. But I would say if the Dolphins are intent to try to trade Tua Tagovailoa, knowing that Ian Rapoport's throwing $30 million out there is just a hypothetical, but it's going to be a significant amount of the salary if they're going to successfully do this. This is not going to happen fast, right? Because they could trade him if they could get somebody to take the entire $54 million of outstanding balance for 2026. If they could get somebody to take that, the Dolphins would have $45.2 million in dead cap. They would save $11 million against the cap this year. But that's not the world in which we live in. And the Dolphins are certainly not in the market to be giving away draft capital to have somebody buy the contract by taking on like your pick at 43 to offload with the player with the contract to offload the contract. Like that's not really the business that you get the sense that John Eric Sullivan and the Dolphins are in when they talk about wanting to build through the draft. If anything, I think the pendulum swings the other way, and they'd be more likely to add more draft capital than to be giving draft capital away. I'll talk a little bit more about that in segment 2 with one of these names that got dropped as Adam Schefter kind of slammed the door shut on being an option for a trade candidate at quarterback. But if the Dolphins have to eat that significant chunk, knowing that it's 45 is the baseline, and then if they eat another 20, just call it 20. Okay, now it's 65. If they eat 30, it's $75 million in dead cap. That has to be accounted for, and that just happened last year with Jalen Ramsey, right, where the Dolphins agreed to pay more of the salary, and they took on a larger dead cap charge to facilitate the move of Jalen Ramsey. So we just saw something like this play out with smaller dollars than what we're talking about here. And that's the thought and the point that I have is that Jalen Ramsey saga is probably going to be something similar to how we see this play out with Tua. You know, the question is, do they proactively eat some of the money and convert it from base salary to facilitate a little bit of salary cap savings if they know they're going to be eating it up front anyway? And then you could go through the trade process. And if you do that and you buy yourself some wiggle room with the cap in that regard, you know, you have operating cap in the here and now, and that allows you to offload all your other bad contracts. But then you can get past the draft and see what teams strike out. And if you proactively buy the salary down, like you can get it to a point where teams can come to the table and know, okay, here's the outstanding balance that we left $20 million in salary. We left $15 million in salary. And like teams know what's left to hopefully just come and take it if you negotiate with other teams. And that all depends on, you know, you're setting the stage for you to potentially have suitors based on your window to trade is going to probably be after May, right? It's going to get into that post-June 1st window to execute trade. So because you're eating the salary, you can split it across 2 years of the salary cap. Or if you don't get offers that you like, you can then make the decision to treat it as a post-June 1st cut by just releasing him after June 1st. Or depending on what your own quarterback situation is, you say, hey, maybe the sunk cost being what it is, we've already reshuffled parts of this contract. We didn't get any trade offers that we like, but we also didn't really like what we were able to do with our quarterback room. Maybe we'll just keep him this year. Like, that's the kind of move I think you can make to kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, buy yourself some time, but also have some wiggle room by proactively reallocating some of the base salary to have operating cap. And then if you don't use that, and I don't expect they're going to be like gangbusters in free agency, right? But it gives you wiggle room to get rid of other bad contracts and not be paying other players salary that's not guaranteed that you don't have to pay because you have to pay the Tua money anyway unless you get somebody to take it from you. So I would not expect like, it's the first week in March. This is what's happening with Tua. It's all done. Like, I kind of think it's going to be a long wait, but there's a long game here this offseason that I think you're going to probably see him be on the roster past the June 1st timeline, because if they're serious about exploring trade options and they want to give themselves a chance to do it, and they know they're going to have to buy down some of the salary, maybe they take that base salary and they play with a little bit, and then it buys them a window to kind of make a decision and see what's out there and decide we want to keep him and compete. We want to move on from him. We want to cut him. We want to trade him, like however it goes. But you're automatically, if you wait past June 1st in that window where you can divvy that up and soften that blow against your roster. But this pathway allows you to make other big decisions first. Because if you make just the Tua decision, you throw your hands up and say, we're out of here. I'm not doing this anymore. Like if you do that, mathematically, it's impossible to do pre-June 1st. Like I've tried. You can't get a top 51 salary unless you're like extending Tyreek Hill, extending Minkah Fitzpatrick, extending Austin Jackson, extending Bradley Chubb, extending Aaron Brewer and James Day. Like you don't want to do extensions for some of these players. It's not feasible to do all-in-one $99 million dead cap charge here and now. We want to get rid of it. You can't, like mathematically, you can't. You can't. So if you're getting into the June 1st window anyway, you can either choose to just cut them with a post-June 1st designation, or you can play around with the contract that exists as a fixed cost and put yourself in a position where you can play the long game and see what opportunities present themselves early into the summertime, which I think is what's going to happen. Some more thoughts on the quarterback timeline for the Dolphins and a name that had maybe some connections to Miami that Adam Schefter kind of slammed the door shut on. That's next. Stick with us. Finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in network nearby and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. This kind of doctor does exist, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering 200 specialties with primary care, dentistry, dermatology, eye care, you name it. I'll admit it. I'll come clean. I've been very guilty in the past myself of putting off doctor's appointments because the booking convenience and finding times within my schedules is not easy, right? I got 2 little ones at home. Life's crazy. But with ZocDoc, you can stop putting off doctor's appointments, easily find doctors in network and ones that you connect with as well. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book a doctor that you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. The Dolphins are getting ready to hire someone to come in and compete at quarterback. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important that fit is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling and get your post seen on the other sites. Indeed, to sponsored jobs, puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. If you were going to hire somebody for this show, you could go straight to Indeed and be very specific about what you're looking for with real experience and not just resume buzzwords. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes and less stress, less time, and more results. By using Indeed sponsored jobs, listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now. Support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. All right. Adam Schefter. He was on, again, this media parade that happens with Super Bowl week and the build-up, right? And he was on, I think it was NFL Live yesterday, and they were talking about the Vikings. And Malik Willis, who's the buzzy free agent name, kind of came up, and they were brainstorming names and talking about whether or not Malik Willis was the right kind of fit at quarterback in Minnesota, who's also going to end up being in the quarterback market because J.J. McCarthy went nuclear on them, and it kind of sunk their season, right? And ultimately cost their GM his job when it was all said and done. And they talked about Malik and him wanting to find an opportunity where he'll get a chance to be the starter. And Adam Schefter pretty much came straight out and said, if Malik Willis went to the Vikings, he would not be the starter, making it sound like they are going to try to make it work with J.J. McCarthy, or they want it to work with J.J. McCarthy. I think Kirk Cousins is probably in play there. He never really wanted to leave Minnesota in the first place. Feels like the right kind of short-term bridge with a guy on a first-round contract that maybe needs more time to develop instead of another young guy. And after I finish this Adam Schefter thought, we're going to talk about kind of my thoughts on the bridge options and things I think are appealing and not appealing. But the conversation turned from Malik Willis to Mac Jones, the backup quarterback in San Francisco, who signed a 2-year deal in free agency last year, helped keep things afloat when Brock Purdy got hurt, and Brock seemingly hurt every year. He's missing a month, right? For this, that, or the other thing. Adam did not pull any punches. He's not getting traded. That is not going to happen. Not going to happen. That's a direct quote from Adam Schefter about Mac Jones. Now, Mac Jones is not particularly high on my list and target board for like options at quarterbacks, but Bobby Slowick is a Shanahan disciple, and Mac Jones, after working with Matt Patricia as his offensive coordinator. Matt Patricia, by the way, was the DC in Ohio State this past year and was Mac Jones' offensive coordinator. That in and of itself should have been a disqualifier for Belichick. First ballot Hall of Famer was that decision. But Mac goes in free agency to San Francisco, plays well. And kind of the speculation was, hey, San Francisco, they had over $100 million in dead cap last year. They let a lot of players walk out the door. Would they be interested in cashing out on Mac Jones? And apparently not. I mean, Schefter was very emphatic with what he said. But the connection with Bobby Slowick and Kyle Shanahan and the kind of offense that you're running and Mac Jones' success in that offense, I think it's a name that would be reasonable to bring up in the list of possible candidates and targets and options for the Dolphins because of that connection with the kind of offensive system that Mac just had success with. He did leave the door. I mean, I think it was Dan Orlovsky asked, like, what if the Falcons offered a second-round pick? And Adam said, anything is always possible. There's no absolutes, but the 49ers have zero plans to trade Mac Jones. So if he was on your list as maybe the Dolphins send a mid-round pick to San Francisco and bring in Mac Jones, and if it doesn't work, like the appeal would be the system, obviously, but then it's a 1-year contract for less than $5 million. So if it didn't pan out in your favor, if he didn't play well, as a player that's a young player that has some long-term appeal, but if it didn't pay off for you, you could turn around and you say, well, we didn't really lose anything in the way of opportunity costs other than the draft pick that maybe we could have replaced because we're not sinking a bunch of money into Mac Jones. There's a short-term contract with negligible dollars attached to it for a quarterback contract, right? It's like 1/10 of the going rate of like the top 12 quarterback contracts in the league. $5 million is nothing for a starting quarterback. So that would have been the appeal of the Mac Jones path. But it sounds like San Francisco with Brock Purdy's kind of persistent injury pathway every year, there's something for at least a month. 49ers probably going to hold on to him, which brings me back to Kirk Cousins as like another possible scheme fit that could make some sense. And I get it, but I would hate it personally. Like, at least we're talking about Mac Jones and Malik Willis. And if you want to invoke like Anthony Richardson, who I wouldn't like love either, or if you want to go like less attractive guys on rookie contract targets like Spencer Rattler in New Orleans, who got benched for Tyler Shuck, or Will Levis as a lottery ticket out of like you can invoke a bunch of names. At least all of them, and then Malik Willis, there's some long-term possibilities with that. Like the Aaron Rodgerses of the world and the Kirk Cousins of the world. For me, like the juice there's not even worth the squeeze because it's just a stopgap, and you're building your whole team up now. So if you want to take a swing on somebody that you've got conviction about, whether that's via trade or free agency or the draft, like cool, go for it. Like I wouldn't draft Ty Simpson at 11. I think it'd be a catastrophic decision to do that. But if you got conviction about it, cool. Like knock yourself out because there's a long-term viability with those kinds of pathways. But these late 30s guys, the Joe Flacco's of the world, the Kirk Cousinses of the world, if Aaron Rodgers leaves, none of those to me really move the needle just because it's like, okay, we're we're going to be back in this place again next year. And maybe if you trade for Spencer Rattler, if you sign Malik Willis, maybe they don't play well and you're back in these shoes again next year anyway. And it's like, okay, yeah, then we took a shot on a guy who could have allowed us to skip the line and feel like we had an answer that we could work with. And I think regardless of what whoever you bring in does, I'm probably still going to be pro the idea of drafting a quarterback relatively early in what's expected to be a good class. Because that's putting John Eric Sullivan's quarterback philosophy into practice, is not being content the first time you see somebody with a pulse at quarterback, to really ramp up the competition and overinvest with attractive options, because none of them are guaranteed to pan out. But if you take your bat off your shoulder more than once every 6 years, you're going to give yourself a better chance on having somebody who hits. So that's, you can close the book on Mac Jones. And I would let somebody else, whether that's the Vikings with McCarthy or whoever, I would let them go the Kirk Cousins route. It wouldn't be me, personally. We do have another scratch-off lottery ticket. It's our second one of the week. We're going to talk about Old Dominion tight end Zack Kuntz next here on the show. Make sure you guys stick with us. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You could buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when momentum shifts, you can move with it. Always knew the game, but never had that dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I could actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play-by-play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. So the new year gets going. A lot of people are trying to simplify their routines. Dinner can be a big one. And as solo dad tonight with 2 kids, you can bet Home Chef's going to have my back tonight. Between busy work days, cold winter nights, packed schedules, having an easy, reliable dinner plan makes all the difference. That's where Home Chef comes in, by delivering fresh, pre-portioned ingredients right to your door with easy-to-follow recipes that actually taste great. They're rated #1 by users of other meal kits for quality, convenience, value, taste, and recipe ease. And it's easy to see why. Meals come ready to fit your schedule. 30-minute recipes, oven-ready trays, quick lunches, over 30 weekly options, including family-sized meals and different dietary choices. Saves time on money and groceries. Home Chef customers average savings of $86 per month on their groceries. For a limited time, Home Chef is offering our listeners 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Just go to homechef.com/locked-on. That's homechef.com/locked-on for 50% off your first box, free shipping, and free dessert for life. Must be an active subscriber to receive the free dessert. Lotto scratch-off ticket number 2. Zack Kuntz, formerly of Penn State. So he was a 4-star recruit from the Penn State Nittany Lions. Didn't work out at Penn State. He enters the transfer portal. Had looks from some big schools like Adam Brenneman talked about. He was the tight end. He was a former tight end who was from PA. He was the tight ends coach at Arizona State under Herm Edwards when Kuntz was in the transfer portal. Brenneman's now like a big-time college football podcaster. And he talked about like they almost brought in Zack Kuntz from the transfer portal to Arizona State. Instead, he goes to Old Dominion. And in the same way that Terrace Marshall Jr. was like big-bodied, linear explosiveness kind of pass catcher, you want to talk about some linear explosiveness. Now, emphasis on the word linear, regardless of what all the athletic tests would tell you. Zack Kuntz had an all-time great NFL combine. He came through the draft process in 2023, and he was 6'6" and 5/8, 255 pounds, 34-inch arms, 10.25-inch hands, a 4.55 second 40-yard dash with a 40-inch vertical leap, a 10.8 standing broad jump, a 6.87 three-cone drill, a 4.12 second short shuttle, 23 reps on the bench press with the 34-inch arms as a 255-pound tight end, right? Like, physically gifted, exceptionally gifted. Math Bomb on Twitter does Kentley Platt. It's relative athleticism scores. That's, at your position, what percentile your tests are over a historical data set. He rated as the most athletic tight end in the history of the NFL Combine. The history of the NFL Combine. And to put it into numbers, I want to read the percentiles of all the measurements. Height, he was 94th percentile. Arm length, he was 80. This is all NFL tight ends to go through the NFL Combine. 94th percentile at height. 85th percentile in arm length. 81st percentile for hand size. 87th percentile for 10-yard split, which was 1.57 seconds. 92nd percentile for 40-yard dash. 97th percentile for vertical jump. 96th percentile for broad jump. 91st percentile for the three-cone drill. 94th percentile for the short shuttle. 75th percentile for the bench press. Now, all that's great and cool, right? But he went to the Jets as a late-round pick, and it didn't happen. And he spent last year, I think, with the DC Defenders. Right? Now, the Dolphins got him on a futures contract. This is why we call them scratch-off tickets. All that athleticism, and it hasn't helped him apply to the football field in a way in which he's been able to be a productive NFL player. Sometimes it's just functional athleticism versus tested athleticism. And the functional athleticism hasn't been there, and the instincts haven't been there to allow him to find a role in a place in which he very easily could have found a role with the New York Jets. But when you're allocating scratch-off tickets, which is what this is, bet on guys with tools, have them compete, see if anybody declares themselves and earns not just a roster spot, but playing time. I like the process of two big-time height, weight, speed element players that you've added to the roster that had once upon a time, 4-star recruit and a second-round pick. Marshall was a second-round pick, and this is a 4-star recruit out of high school. You have those kinds of pedigrees that can stay with you as young players. And he was in the 23 draft. It's not like he's 31 years old. And I say that as somebody who's well over 31, so I'm aging myself. I'm the old guy here. If there's any players that listen and took offense to me saying 31 was old. But get these high tools guys in here and ramp up the competition and compete. Right? And see if there's any, to quote the old macho man, oh yeah, Randy Savage, the cream will rise to the top, right? We're anybody want to rise up? Anybody claim a roster spot? Anybody claim some playing time? Guys that have some physical gifts and give them the chance to do so and see what they do with it. Again, they'll probably have a dozen of these guys on the roster this year. They got 2 this week. Get a dozen of them, 1 or 2 of them. Odds are you're going to catch lightning in a bottle with 1 or 2 of them. Great. That's 1 or 2 more answers on your roster than what you had beforehand. And these guys on futures contracts, they're minimum salary players. They don't even cost you at all against the cap. Hard to get mad about that. So we'll see what Zack Kuntz does. We'll see who else they add. What are the lottery tickets they can find for themselves? That's going to do it for us here today on the show. Kyle Crabbs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Make it a great weekend, and I will talk to you all again on Monday.